The world in which A Nightmare on Elm Street takes place is dark and bleak. The atmosphere is hazy and almost dreamlike. People go on about their daily lives, but their reality is seemingly different from ours, existing in a way that seems to be just on the margins of our consciousness. Okay, but seriously. The characters in A Nightmare on Elm Street face off against a seemingly bland existence in which they attend an extremely boring school, live with parents who couldn't give two shits, all of which are likely guilty of premeditated murder, and yet they contend with all of this while dealing with the scariest thing of all, transitioning into adulthood. Oh, also they have to fight for survival against a demon made of pizza that attacks them in their dreams. But more on that later. In this video series, I will try to accomplish something no slasher movie has dared to do before. I will attempt to add some depth to these characters. Typically, characters in slasher films do not have much to them beyond the surface level. And that's kind of the whole point. Movies like Halloween and Friday the 13th set a precedent for the genre that the killer is the main character, and all the meatbag regular humans of the movie serve as a canvas for murderous creativity. But Nightmare does this differently. Yes, it's still a slasher. Freddy's very much the main character and becomes even more so as the franchise continues. However, here at the beginning of the Nightmare story, I find all these characters are interesting, at least slightly past the surface. They have flaws, they make mistakes, and even put in positions for you to root for them. They are not the typical horny teen death fodder seen in other slashers, and it makes their deaths more harrowing to watch, conducted by the very mean-spirited Freddy Krueger. I'm not going to sit here and discuss all the meta stuff of the movie, I'll save that for other channels. If you want to know what color socks Wes Craven was wearing or which actor in this movie is related to Don Knotts, there are plenty of other channels for that. I just want to talk about the characters in this movie and how I felt while watching them. So starting off with Freddy's first victim in this movie, Tina Gray. So, I love everything the film does with Tina. She's an amazing bait and switch for the beginning of the movie and really sets up how formidable Freddy Krueger is. She's tormented by Freddy during the night, but during the day she's also tormented by her relationship with Rod. We know he isn't a good guy for her just based on how they interact and fight with each other. Their relationship seems to be one of physicality, due to the fact they have no problem having sex, but they really can't talk about their feelings. My theory on why she puts up with him is she can't stand being alone, or is afraid to face the world alone. And this is backed up by the way she wants Nancy and Glenn around when her parents are gone, because she's afraid to be alone with her nightmares. She is brave around her friends, but when she's alone, she isn't prepared to deal with her problems, which is why I think she puts up with Rod. His strong exterior and illusion of a tough guy likely comforts her and makes her feel safe, even if he is a knife-wielding psycho. However, when she does confront Freddy, she has to do it all by herself. She is woefully unprepared for their meeting. I love the movie for what happens next. Tina gets herself together and does confront Freddy. In a normal movie, getting the nerve to face your fears usually means you win. But that's just not how it works this time. I'm happy for Tina for gaining the courage to face her fears, but once she's up against Freddy, she has no chance to contend with him and can only run away screaming. Which is a perfectly natural response, and I probably would have too. Tina's flaw here is thinking that being courageous would be enough, which I'm sad to say is not. Courage is a damn good asset, but you can be completely terrified of something and still face it. To compare Tina to Nancy, this is their main difference. Tina believes courage is enough to defeat your fears, but Nancy understands that you should also be prepared to face the problem and not just run into it in a dark alley in your underwear. I'm going to butcher a famous military training quote on purpose here and say, "We do not rise to the level of our challenge, but we fall to the level of our preparation." I want to put a pin in this though and save it for our discussion about Nancy later. Right now, let's finish up Tina. Tina was built up by this movie to be the main character, and when she goes against the antagonist, she is cut down in a brutal way. The film goes out of its way to set up Tina as the protagonist and make her seem strong and capable, and then gutted her first to show the audience that Freddy is not messing around and anything could happen to anyone, which sets us up for the next character, Rod. When people watch movies, they will typically find a character they identify with, and in most cases, people will look to the hero of the film and say, "Yep, that's me." Just like most people who watch The Office will say, "Oh, I'd totally be Jim because he's funny and charismatic and likable." When in most cases, you people would totally be Dwight, and we all know it's true. This is the same thing for Rod. Rod is the Dwight Schrute of this film. But let me explain. I absolutely love Rod as a character because he, like Tina, is built up to be a strong character. So when his gut-wrenching death on screen happens, it feels like the entire audience is collectively kicked in the balls. Did we like Rod? No, probably not. He's an asshole. He threatens people with a knife, and he emotionally manipulates Tina. We all have a Rod Lane in our lives, and we typically hate this guy. That being said, we can all agree he did not deserve the death he got. It makes you feel helpless while you watch this guy get framed for his own death. To me, Rod represents a fake tough guy. Rod has a ton to prove to everyone, and approaches the world and his problems with a lot of fake bravado. More often than not, we as humans are not equipped to handle the world like that, since we typically need people in our lives to help us realize the weaknesses we have. Rod strikes me as a character that cannot open up to others for fear of being rejected or laughed at. The only time we do see him open up is to Tina about his nightmares, and when she seems legitimately inquisitive and ready to see Rod open up, he takes it as an insult and decides to ignore her. He is so threatened by his own feelings that he takes it out on others. Even in his friendship with Glenn, he needs to make Glenn look weak in front of the girls to make himself seem tougher. He tears everyone down around him to make himself seem stronger. I believe deep down, Rod is scared of a lot of things, his own feelings most of all. His behavior leads to him being detested by any authority that might try to help him out, as well as isolates him from his friends. When we call out to others for help, we will most likely receive it. However, when our cries for help look like bullying or manipulative behavior, those would-be rescuers around us will back off for fear of getting hurt by us. When we lash out at others who don't understand why it's happening, they will abandon us, and for good reason. Why would anyone want to help the guy who acts like he doesn't need help, and even worse, is mean to the ones who are helping him? I think a lot of us are at risk of becoming Rod Lane, or at least know someone in our lives that is. A dude in a sweet jacket who talks the loudest, lifts the heaviest, hits the hardest, doing all of this because they are protecting the weakness inside. But as we all know, you cannot hide from Freddy, and he shines a light on all of Rod's weaknesses. And Rod, having pushed everyone out of his life that might try to help him, has to face the Dream Demon all alone, and stands absolutely no chance. All of his bravado, all of his might, yet he's powerless in his fear. Okay, let's talk about a character I find way less deep. Or should I say, dep. Glenn. Glenn is the third and final victim of the Springwood slasher, unless you count, of course, the inflatable doll at the end. To me, Glenn is the blandest character of the four friends. He's kind of aloof, and he doesn't really pay a lot of attention to the world around him. He loves Nancy, and they interact well, and he generally has a good disposition. However, I can't really justify why he's in this movie. Is it to give Nancy someone close to her to lose to Freddy? But that already happens when her best friend is the first to go in the movie. I'd argue Nancy reacts harder to Tina's death than to Glenn's. But maybe that's because she was going for the Guinness Book of World Records no sleep title at that point in the movie. Glenn is just kind of an airheaded partner to the protagonist, a gender swap on a classic trope in horror, as he is sort of a damsel in distress that Nancy is unfortunately not able to save. With Glenn being a boring character, however, the only true loss here is that wonderful crop top that went along with Glenn. He does have an amazing death scene, though, and his parents are so unlikable that you want something bad to happen to them. Too bad it's Glenn's blood tornado and this amazing spinning room trick. And finally, we have the protagonist of the movie, and the reigning champion of the all-time best final girl, Nancy Thompson. The sole survivor of the four teens terrorized by Freddy, Nancy survives several encounters with Freddy throughout the movie. She learns his weaknesses and limitations, and at the end of the movie, we are treated with the most amazing Home Alone-style Freddy vs. Nancy grudge match. A no-holds-barred, foreign object-inclusive, light bulb booby trap exploding, hammer to the nuts fight to the death that ends in Freddy engulfed in flames and falling downstairs head first. But let's back up. How did we get here? What makes Nancy a survivor when everyone else stands zero chance against Freddy? If you pay close attention to Nancy's behaviors throughout the film, you will notice a very subtle character trait of Nancy. She is a planner. She has a plan for everything, and a backup plan. She prepares like no one else. She doesn't overestimate herself, and she understands the threats of the world very well. She doesn't charge into battle against Freddy with only her weapon being her waning courage like Tina. She pushes herself to face her fears in a capacity she can control, and in doing so, gets a little braver each time. And this is so brilliant. This is what makes Nancy such an endearing character to me. She isn't so naive as to believe that, like Tina, she can go 100% against her greatest fears on the first try. Nancy instead proceeds to give us all a masterclass on how to face fear. She prepares several escape routes for herself to use when things get too rough, and she actually uses them. She doesn't feel guilty or weak for doing so. She proves to us that facing your fears takes time, and it's okay to stumble on the way. Just don't ever give up on them. Her character trait as a preparation expert foreshadows itself several times throughout the film. For instance, when she asks Glenn to stay awake for her while she tries to go gather more information on Freddy, what wakes her up from the nightmare? Was it Glenn? No, he was asleep. It was the alarm clock that wakes her. Well, who do you think set the alarm clock? She had a backup plan to the backup plan. Same thing happens with the coffee machine. Her mom takes her pot and all her cups before leaving her room, and Nancy goes under her nightstand to grab another pot. This is one of the funnier scenes of the movie for me just because of how ridiculous it is. Like, did she always have that there? How did her mom not smell the coffee brewing? And the way she hops out of bed to grab her coffee, it's just hilarious to me. And lastly, the culmination of this behavior, turning her home into a booby trap maze. Much like a spider with his web, Freddy is a master of control in his own domain. He can alter the nightmare to disorient and ambush his victims, and this would be enough to get his prey itself. But on top of that, he commands supernatural powers to use against them as well. Nancy knows this, and she knows she can pull him out of that world and into hers, away from his domineering environment and into a place where his powers cannot reach her. A place where she knows the layout, and she knows where all the weapons she can use are, and she's able to manipulate her domain to do to Freddy what he's always done against his victims. The entire thing is beautiful. Even the goofy fire suit that Fat Freddy wears in the basement. You can say what you want. I always love a good fire stunt, and this one goes for a long time. Nancy turns Freddy from a terrifying monster into a Power Ranger-style static edit to destroy him once and for all. Or so it would seem. We are immediately treated to a hazy scene where the four friends are all alive again and seemingly the nightmare is over, until a familiar sweater, or should I say soft top, covers Glenn's car and drives them away, signaling that just because you faced your fears and beaten them doesn't mean they are gone forever. You will have to contend with these fears in the future, but if you continue to work on them, go at your own speed, and do what works best for you, you can live your life without losing your life to fear. Hey guys, thanks for watching the video, and an extra special thank you if you're still watching this far in. I'm just getting started with this whole YouTube thing, and I've always been a massive fan of slasher flicks since I was young, and now that I have the extra time, I'd like to continue to analyze these films and the characters within them. I picked this film because while it is a slasher franchise, it feels the most like a horror film to me out of the big three, and I feel like it has the best characters. I really believe the filmmakers put time and effort into making them likable, and the cast really has chemistry. I really believe these characters could be real people that exist, except for Glenn. That being said, I'm going to work on a similar style of video for Friday the 13th series next, which is my favorite slasher franchise. That's it for the video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Please like the video if you liked it and subscribe if you really liked it, and feel free to comment on how the characters made you feel and what you think makes a good slasher character. Until next time, thanks guys.